Week 5 produced some crazy results. We're going to talk about the best wins, worst losses, and biggest questions coming out of the weekend today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply.
Happy Victory Monday to those who are celebrating. And Joe, are you excited for two of the top three teams in all of the college football land to play one another this upcoming weekend?
Who are those teams?
A Big Ten Classic showcase between Ohio State and the Oregon Ducks.
Those are two of the best three?
Those are two of the top currently ranked in the top three.
Yes. Who is the other team in there?
Texas at 1. Because the former number one team in all the land was the Alabama Crimson Tide, and they lost to Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt pulled the all-time petty receipt. I don't know if you saw that part. Did you see that?
I saw them carrying the goalpost to Broadway, but that was about it.
About a 2.5 mile walk, I believe. They took
That's
the
pretty
goalposts on.
Yeah.
No, it was Nick Saban a couple weeks ago was talking to Pat McAfee and said the only place that's not hard to play in the SEC is Vanderbilt because you'll have more fans in the stands than they will. And as soon as that clock hit triple zeros, they put that clip on the video board at the stadium and played it while Saban's sitting there, the Alabama's on the sideline.
Nick Saban learning a hard lesson in media, basily never tweet, right?
Never say anything about anything ever or have an opinion because it's going to be wrong.
Yeah, just don't. Yeah. So, and people don't forget.
I meant to do this for Takes on Takes the other day. Didn't come up. And I put this on media and I asked my followers, and 80% of them are Dolphins fans, so it was not the right collection of people to ask. Whose stint in media are you enjoying more between Nick Saban and Bill Belichick?
Oh, Belichick by a billion.
Why?
First of all, because I haven't really consumed much of Nick Saban, but
okay, that's right.
I mean, I learned things from Saban, from Belichick, and I love the special teams analysis that he's been able to give and like really highlighting different moments in games that I think are underrated. So I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed him talking about kind of his own process coming out of games and the conversations he would have with coaches and players and how he would handle specific things. Like it's been very, very good.
Okay.
You disagree?
I like Nick. I think Nick's really good, like in the game day setting. I think he provides good, and it's like a good blend of the analysis along with the personality that I think meshes well with the other people on game day.
Yeah, well, as somebody who hasn't really watched much of that, I feel like the only thing I see is him and McAfee just doing goofy things together, which I guess is entertaining, but I like the nerdy stuff that Belichick.
For sake of getting unblocked and then blocked by Pat McAfee, I will offer no comment.
Okay.
Since I'm still blocked by Pat McAfee.
Yeah, I get it. This Pat has been betted against you for years.
All right. Just because I want college coaches to call 48-yard field goals as 14-point underdogs when they're up 7 points in the second quarter on 4th and 3. I'd rather have you just go for it and try and get a higher percentage points outcome, but that's not about
he took great exception to that.
He did. We're going to cover week 5 of the NFL, looking in particular, starting with the best wins of the weekend. Joe, which one sticks out to you?
I think there's a number of contestants, but maybe the Ravens. The Ravens go 41-38 shootout with the Bengals winning in overtime. Their Ravens have now won 3 in a row. And I think Lamar, like this wasn't a game necessarily where their rushing offense was everything. Lamar threw the ball 42 times, 4 touchdowns, 348 yards passing to go with 175 rushing yards that the team had. Like this was just a very complete performance. And Lamar had been very efficient the last 2 weeks in the passing game, kind of complementing the run game. But he was able to really deliver some big time throws and really exposed some major issues with Cincinnati on that defense. I mean, defensively, they're just playing very poorly right now. And, that includes having to really do some special things down the stretch to beat Carolina last week. And, they lose to Washington because they can't defend anybody. So I think you're finding that Cincy's defense is a fatal flaw, but Baltimore, after a slow start, boy, they look like they're a unit right now.
I'll go Arizona.
Good one.
Winning in San Francisco against the 49ers. San Francisco had a chance to, at a fourth quarter comeback, no less, scored the final 11 points in the fourth quarter. They scored in that football game. San Francisco had an opportunity late. They get a turnover in the final couple ticks on the clock to seal it and make sure that they're able to run out the clock. But if I told you that Brock Purdy was going to have Trent and Brandon Ayuk and Debo and George Kittle and the 49ers were going to average 5.9 yards per carry on the ground without Christian McCaffrey, and they're playing at home against the Cardinals, you'd probably say, oh, okay, did San Francisco cover the 7.5 point spread?
Right.
And the answer was no, they lost the game. So, for Arizona, who I think we're still figuring out what they are. I think we alluded to last week, maybe they had come back down to earth a little bit. Does it say more about a 2-3 San Francisco team that feels like they have not really jived all that well all season long to this point? Or does it say more about Arizona? Maybe we need a bigger sample size in both of those teams in the direction that they're going to head, but definitely an outcome that raises some eyebrows. This was another touchdown plus underdog who comes out and wins a game outright and wins it on the road in a divisional opponent matchup. It's a big win.
I had some cash on Arizona covering. Did not expect them to win the game, but they scored 14. They won the second half 14-0. I mean, that's can't happen. That just can't happen. And obviously, the Jordan Mason fumble was a killer. They go back-to-back turnovers on the last 2 drives, right?
The
interception, Purdy was kind of hit as he threw and threw the pick. So, big win for Arizona.
They turned it over on downs on a possession that took 7 minutes. San Francisco did.
It's tough.
So that's your final 3 possessions.
Boy,
you go the one in front of it. It's an interception.
Oh my
God.
So
their second half possessions were interception, 7-minute drive that's turnover on downs, fumble, interception.
Boy, that's how you lose a football.
That's how you win the game if you're Arizona.
Boy.
I like how you said that's how you lose the game, and I said that's how you win the game.
I want to shout out. We got to shout out the 5-0 Minnesota Vikings going across the pond.
Minnesota Vikings.
They survived, right? Like feels like 2 weeks in a row. They start hot and like
take their foot off the gas.
Yeah, they do. And I don't. I hate to say they take their foot off the gas, but like it's hard to argue against it.
They should have boat raced the Jets with how the way that first half went.
I think Aaron Jones getting injured mattered.
I think it did too, because I got about halfway through the fourth quarter to say, hey, maybe we could give the ball to Ty Chandler a little less.
Right.
Can we try something else?
and just, I mean, Darnold just not very efficient with how he played that game at quarterback. He had some dimes early in the game. Like everything was early, and then they just held on to the end. And I think there's probably a conversation to have about Aaron Rodgers, and this is another week of 50-something passing attempts.
54 pass attempts.
Oh God.
Sacked 3 times and 3 interceptions. Looked like he got hurt again for the second consecutive week, going down, grabbing a lower body extremity.
22 targets for Garrett Wilson. We can't run the ball to save our lives.
Yeah.
It's
14 attempts for 36 yards, 2.6 yards per carry as a team. With the way that they kind of showed that they could run the ball early in the season, is a rough look. I have some thoughts here, and I know we got to get to break. Can I just give them to you on the other side of it?
Sure. That okay. And worst losses. I got one of those to talk about. Stick with us, folks. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's something that scares you? My biggest personal fear is letting people down that count on me. Well, Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them, because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire that'll get you matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
So I guess my thought with the current state of affairs with the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers, how things are looking there, is it's very apparent that Aaron and the way that he detail-oriented sees and tries to play the game, it was perhaps, with the benefit of hindsight, the biggest potential hurdle to this working in New York. And there's still a lot of ball game left, right? Like, you've played 5 games. You've got 12 games left to play. Like, we'll see what happens from here.
Right.
And I know Tom Brady came to Tampa Bay in the first 12 games. They were 7-5 and didn't really get on the same page and click. But the number of times where Aaron sees coverage a certain way and the guys he's throwing the ball to see it a different way, and he throws it in a spot expecting the receiver to see it the same way, and they don't. And then the camera pans from the end zone shot down to Aaron Rodgers, and he's got the Office glare on his face, or the what's the theme song for the show?
It's The Office, right? Yeah.
Is that The Office?
I think so. I wasn't super discernible by your hum there, but
yeah, but I lost track of the amount of times where I'm like, man, Aaron's pissed at him that he didn't see it that way.
Right. Every play.
You played in Arizona, or you played in Green Bay with all these guys. Maybe that's why this whole process was going out and getting the guys that you've played with to kind of jumpstart and fast track that. But if you're going to throw the ball to the guy you didn't play with in Green Bay 22 times, you're probably going to have those kinds of issues.
They're going to go get Davante Adams. Is that what's going to happen here?
Probably. Does it solve their issues, really?
It helps.
Does it solve their problems offensively, though?
It helps. They can't run the ball, and I don't think I've said their defense isn't what it was.
Okay.
You think it solves their problems? I mean, you certainly didn't feel like it does.
I don't.
So you don't think a receiver that he has experience throwing the football to would be helpful?
I don't think it's
everything you just described?
On the pecking order of issues that they have, I think Aaron, where he's at in this stage of his career and his mobility, I think the offensive line in general, I think the running game in general, I think all of those are issues more so than having somebody that I can, in a tick, throw a back shouldered ball to and expect him to be expecting a back shoulder ball so that Stephon Gilmore is not the only guy that gets his eyes on the football and makes a play.
It's not the cure-all, but I think it's to not acknowledge that it would help. I don't – is that what you're saying? It wouldn't help?
It would be an upgrade at a wide receiver position that, in the spectrum of problem solving the things that are wrong with New York, I kind of feel like you just need to kind of work through and get the time on task with the guys that you have regardless.
That would be, that's got to happen nonetheless. Well, their next opponent is coming off a team that has a signature bad loss. That would be the Buffalo Bills, falling 23-20 to the Houston Texans. Houston up 3 scores in the second half. The Bills come back to tie the game, and the full comeback is spoiled, due in large to just an inexplicable, indefensible sequence at the end of the game for the Bills, where they're backed up on their own 3. it's a tie game. You're just trying to get to overtime. And we all know that Ka'imi Fairburn's an unbelievable kicker for the Texans. The Bills had to get a first down. Their method in which to try to get a first down was to launch the ball down the field 3 times when they don't have any good vertical receivers. And Josh Allen was 0 of 13 on passes 15 yards or more down the field for the entire game.
Can he play Miami like that just one time?
Well,
what did Houston do? Was it the
they played
presence?
They played one high middle of the field close coverage and forced wide receivers to win 1-on-1. But what it really comes down to is the Bills' offense in the first 3 weeks of the season doesn't resemble what we watched the last 2 weeks, where everything Josh Allen was making great decisions in terms of like throwing the ball short, winning yards after catch, being very efficient, and then all of a sudden we're back to big play hunting the last 2 weeks. And all the good graces that you watch those first 3 games and you're like, oh, maybe the Bills are right about this everybody eats thing. And, it's unlocking a new level of play for Josh Allen. Well, all of a sudden they get completely away from that the last 2 weeks.
So how much of this is the right way to make decisions based on box counts? And if you get middle of the field high, then theoretically, and how much of this is opposing defenses kind of getting a gauge on what their early identity was supposed to be and making an adjustment. And
well, I think you had 2 defenses that were structural. This is what they've been, right? I don't think they made an adjustment for the Bills. This is what they are defensively. But I that's what you're supposed to throw the ball deep and outside with cover, but you don't have the talent to do it, right? So it's kind of exposed that weakness in what Buffalo has at wide receiver. And it's certainly when you don't have Khalil Shakir, who is the number 1 receiver for the Bills, whether he's a true number 1 or not, we can debate that, but he's the one that they throw the ball to the most, that has the most receptions and targets and all that stuff. But yeah, is kind of a bad situation. But when you talk about bad losses, it's allowing your team to kind of come back into that game and then just unbelievably poor management at the end to just rip yourself of an opportunity to get to overtime and have a chance.
How about bad losses? By the way, as a Dalton Kincaid fantasy owner, is it time for me to rip the Band-Aid off and put him on the bench or what?
Yeah, please do that, because then the wake up is coming.
I'll leave him on then. For another month.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Carolina,
about week 9. Put him on there about week 9.
Carolina losing by 26 points, getting shellacked by Caleb Williams in Chicago. And did you catch Dave Canales' comments after the game about why we gave Bryce Young a little run?
I didn't see those, no.
Something along the lines of alluding to having some guys banged up along the offensive line and putting the backup quarterback in because you had some injuries up front.
I know he said that Andy Dalton's a starter. Like, he affirmed that, but I didn't realize he said that.
But it was, it's like, man, are you really going to say that about the number 1 overall pick that you put in timeout? It's like, yeah, we let him run out there because we had some guys hurt on the offensive line.
Yeah, Bryce Young's the meat shield.
He said there was more to it than that, but that was the first place he went, which was like really weird. But for Carolina, you were wondering when Andy Dalton came in, did you get the fired coach 1 game bump with like a new quarterback and benching your quarterback? And it's looking increasingly like they get a 1 game bump from a quarterback change. And I know they scored some points against Cincinnati, but everybody's scoring points against Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's like 31st in scoring defense right now in the NFL. So losing to Chicago by 26 is a pretty rough loss, especially because they didn't have a lot of answers for anything that Chicago wanted to do offensively.
I'll tell you what's a bad loss is Seattle taking a 29-20 loss to the Giants in Seattle.
Yeah.
In a game where Devin Singletary, the lead running back's not available. No Malik Neighbors, right? Not available. You give up 420 yards and 29 points to the Giants at your stadium?
Tyrone Tracy, man. 7.2 yards per rush, 129 yards.
Baller.
We had a blocked field goal and a potential to tie the game that gets ran back in the final minutes.
Dexter Lawrence killed that team.
And that's kind of been the thing. And I experienced this with Miami in week 3, and Seattle cakewalked the game. But I was in preparation for that game. I'm watching the Patriots, and they're pressuring Geno Smith on 50-something% of his dropbacks. And then Zach Sealer and Calais Campbell tore them a new one in that game. And it's like, well, they threw the ball with some good volume, but my goodness, like they really got after that interior from a pass rush standpoint. And this was the game that it finally caught up to you, because I think the guy who's the most stable guy inside is Connor Williams, despite the fact that he's coming off of an injury. And he's not going to match up with 340-pound Dexter Lawrence in a one-on-one situation.
Right. And so Jason Peters, you ready to go to play some guard? Man, they need you in a big way. Like, we knew that interior offensive line was a question for Seattle. You have 7 sacks of the Giants. DJ Davidson has 2 sacks in this game.
Right.
You know,
come on. That is, for a team that started 3-0.
Right.
That's a bad loss. And it's one thing to lose to Detroit. It's another thing entirely to lose to a Giants team without their best offensive player.
At your stadium.
At home. Yeah. That's a rough loss.
All right. We got biggest questions, and I have some quarterback questions. We'll talk about those here on the other side of it, folks. Be sure to stick with us. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook.
Biggest questions.
I think you have to start with the Cleveland Browns and continuing to play Deshaun Watson at quarterback, and Kevin Stefanski coming out and saying that he's the starting quarterback. And like the questions, we know why, right? It's a $230 million guaranteed contract. Certainly ownership has some pull in here, but like at what point is like enough? And the guy just literally can't play, and he's detrimental to like giving yourself a chance to win football games. And you're going to lose your entire operation. I know it's a bad, like you have a bad situation. I get it. But are you making a bad situation worse by continuing to put this guy out there and pretend like he gives you a chance?
The rough thing is for all of the grief that we gave Deshaun for his quote last week about the end of game sequences. Like, he did play well against the Raiders, just not when they needed him to win the football game. So the spurts are so few and far between, though. And this passing against Washington was punchless, right? I mean, we go 125. It's 4.5 yards per attempt. He was sacked 7 times. And I get the offensive line has injuries too, but like, it just really feels like the obvious catalyst to try to bring some life into this football team is to make that change. And if you don't, then I think you are doomed to a season that looks like it could get away from you pretty quickly. And then what are the big picture ramifications of that? Because how much can you hold Kevin Stefanski's feet to the fire if you are ownership and you are making sure that your $230 million investment is staying on the field at quarterback?
What was the point of signing Jameis Winston and tacking 4 void years on the end of his deal if this level of performance doesn't dictate the idea of giving him a chance to play? Like, if Deshaun Watson is the high-profile backup or starter that you're painting him to be, then just have any old guy as the backup. You went out and were very intentional about your quarterback depth, kind of giving us a signal that, hey, if this doesn't work, like, we got options. And you're telling us the commitment is just insane.
I would say Deshaun Watson's missed 11 games in each of the last 2 seasons. So that probably has something to do with it.
It's going to take an injury.
Probably. And now when that happens, I don't think he'll get the job back this season. But it's not like they can just move on from this contract. He's going to be on the team next year, or they're going to cut him and just pay the check. But I think with the guarantees, the way that it accelerates, I don't think that's an option. And he's getting sacked on 11.5% of his dropbacks. It's like you have your offensive line issues, but they are compounded with how he has his career sack rate is 9.3% of dropbacks. So he's always been this way, but you're not getting the good to go with the bad anywhere near as consistently as you did before. And I don't think you have an exit ramp in the contract. So he's going to be here next year. So, what are you going to do? You're going to pay him to sit at home? don't give out fully guaranteed contracts.
And you know what? And everybody thought that was going to change the course of contracts in the history of the NFL, and it did not. It didn't.
Well,
everybody recognized
that got close, but Dak's got about a decade's year worth of proof of concept playing for the same franchise.
Right, and there's been a whole lot of contracts handed out between Deshaun Watson and Dak Prescott that don't look anything like the Deshaun Watson deal.
Oh, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is Joe Flacco better than Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, he is. The offense is better with him.
As somebody who started Alec Pierce in fantasy this week, because AJ Brown was on a bye. And
Worked
AJ
out
Brown
for you.
Killing me because he's been out the last 3 weeks. So
yeah. we can
avid fan of the Joe Flacco Alec Pierce connection after 2 explosive play touchdowns, scoring 24 points against Jacksonville in the fourth quarter. To come all the way back and tie and then do the thing that you just chastised the Bills for doing. The Colts did the same thing. Had a long field goal in the final minute for Jacksonville to get their first win of the season and avoid. Man, if they lose that game after leading the way that they did,
are
we waking up this morning with Doug as the head coach of the football team?
Bye. You're out of here. Now they get their London trip. They get the Bears and the Patriots back to back in London.
Watch, they're going to win the next 2 too.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, certainly the Bears have some momentum coming into that game.
They do.
Caleb. I mean, hats off to Caleb. I've criticized him all year long. He played great against Carolina.
He's gotten steadily or progressively more stable with his play, which is great. And there's going to be bumps in the road, and you understand that. But I obviously Carolina is one story, but that's not to take anything away from the way that Caleb executed. Another question. Which one of these Shanahan coaches is going to get figured out? You got San Francisco at 2-3. You got the Rams at 1-4, right?
Yeah, and the thing about the Rams is they're so beat up, but you feel like the last 2 games are right there for them to take, and they didn't get them.
Right. You got the Dolphins coming off the ugliest football game you will watch this side of a middle school game.
Not many people watched it, Kyle. I can tell you that. So
you missed the Patriots getting penalized 12 times for 105 yards. Did you see the end of game play?
I saw. I watched. That's one of the plays that I've seen. Maybe 3 plays from that game.
What was your takeaway? It's a very controversial ruling that he was ruled.
Didn't Gerard Mayo come out and say that he agreed with the call?
I don't know if he did or not. All I know is it's people are trying to relate it to a toe drag, but the toe drag, it's the only surface contact that you have with your foot.
Right, he has to establish that foot again.
Right, so if your ball of your foot gets down and then your heel comes down out of bounds, don't let your heel touch or put your heel down in bounds. It's the same foot strike. It's one action versus a toe drag is stab the toe in the ground. It's the only thing. And then a prolonged action in bounds. Like I could not believe how controversial this call was that the heel came down out of bounds and a part of the same foot strike with the ground. And it was therefore out of bounds.
Right. Yeah.
Nope.
I didn't take any exception with that call. So I didn't realize that there was controversy around it.
Which Shanahan coach gets it the most turned around this year? Out of those 3, obviously Green Bay has already kind of weathered their storm with Jordan Love missing a couple games with an MCL.
So it's the Dolphins, the 49ers, and who's the other?
The Rams. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you feel best about the 49ers.
Do you? I mean, that division looks a little crazy now.
Okay, what's the argument for the other teams?
The Rams don't have one. I'm just saying, they're all in like super weird spots.
Right, I agree. They're all in weird spots, but the team I feel the best about is the 49ers.
Let me see. Let's take a look at the schedule for San Francisco and do the thing. And then, do you have another thing to do? Do you have another big?
I thought the Raiders in their own situation was interesting to get into for biggest questions. If we're going to roll with O'Connell or what our plan is, they're not the team that they want to be. They can't. Their defense isn't good. Their quarterbacks are bad. They're not running the ball like they want to. It's like the team they planned on being is just not what we're getting.
Yeah. So San Francisco at 2-3. Hear me out. They're at Seattle, Kansas City, Dallas, bye week, at Tampa Bay, Seattle, at Green Bay, at Buffalo, Chicago, Rams, at Miami, Detroit, at Arizona.
So you're saying that while they may be the most talented team, they have the most hard schedule?
I mean, that's just not an easy schedule.
It's not.
They'll be an interesting one to watch because I know we had some questions with them defensively.
And those have intensified.
Right. Now, to their credit, they held the Jets 266 yards of offense. They held the Rams under 300 yards. They held the Patriots to 216. I don't know how much.
Those aren't real offenses.
Okay, I mean Minnesota. Minnesota got them for 403 and Arizona yesterday. That's all they've played.
Right.
I guess you would just look at if you've played the Jets, the Rams, the Patriots, and the Cardinals as 4 of your first 5 games, you'd probably be a little surprised that they're 2-3.
Right. They should be better than they are. They should be. And they've given us some doses of like, oh, there's the 49ers against the Patriots, and there they are against the Jets.
Right.
That's been about it.
Well, and we don't know when McCaffrey's coming back.
Right.
Tendonitis in both Achilles now. Every time there's an update, it gets worse.
Right. Not
Here's
great.
their biggest issue. How many turnovers did San Francisco have?
3.
I mean, that's 8 offensive turnovers in the last 4 games.
It's prohibitive to winning. Yeah.
So there you go. That's all I have. If you have anything else.
Good.
Is at this time next week, is Davante Adams still a Raider?
No.
Okay, Joe's on the record. There you go. We'll find out. And if we get some news on that front or any other front, we'll react to it here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He's Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. Enjoy the football tonight. We are out of here.